You know, it's often been said that Meghan Markle really doesn't pay that much attention to her husband, Prince Harry, formerly known, of course, as the Duke of Sussex. Seems that she's too busy pushing forward, making sure that she shakes hands first and does all the relevant meetings and looking out for the camera lens to make sure that she gets the beauty shot that shows her off to the very best advantage. But of course, in royal circles, that's nothing new. Things like this have gone on for years. And as we saw with some of the great scandals and love stories of the royal family, well, when you think about it, King Edward VII probably had it best. He very much kept his mistresses in the background, making sure, of course, that, well, they were looked after, given exactly what they wanted. He always returned home to, of course, his wife. The public, really, many of them at that particular point had no idea what was going on. But what's fascinating is that this particular love story that everybody thought was the great love story of the century, as it were, because this king abdicated and gave up, of course, the throne for the woman that he loved. Well, this apparent situation really escalated and possibly caused their very first, and sometimes some people say, crucial argument. And it all took place in a London five-star luxury hotel. And what unfolded was something that apparently she quite never really got over. As ever, let me explain. Well, good to see you today. Thank you so much as ever for your time. It is, we'll have a lovely wave. Are you all right? Thank you so much as ever, as I say, for joining me today on a very cold and chilly London town. Don't worry, I'm nicely wrapped up, although the wind is getting up now. Yes, this is the thing, isn't it? You come out, you think, now I need a hat, now I need gloves. By the time you've got them all on, you can't remember where you were going, can you? And then if you have to take them off to get the money out in the shop, you're with me. This is the thing, isn't it? You just get fed up because winter's very hard to deal with on a big level, isn't it? When you come out in the summer, yes, it's a lot easier. You don't need as many things, do you? People might say, of course, that it was a lot easier way back in the day. The day, of course, of when Wallis Simpson and the King, well, they were love's sort of young dream. Well, not that young, but you know the sort of thing I mean. And the sort of story that And the story sort of goes, of course, that Wallis and, of course, the king, as he was, never really had a cross word. In fact, he did exactly what he was told, and she had the life that she wanted. Well, not quite. But what's interesting is this, you see, and this happens, I think, to a lot of people. They don't necessarily realise. You see, one big argument that took place that's never been very well documented was the fact that as the pressure arose on the king and, of course, the divorcee that was Wallis Simpson, well, things were taking a turn for the worst. And as I pointed out, the flat that she was living in with Ernest Simpson, just off Edgware Road, well, it was besieged by reporters. And not only that, even back in the day, people were trying to rent the room next door so they could listen into any clandestine meetings. You see, he'd been there on quite a number of occasions, spotted by all the neighbours, and they knew exactly the time, etc., simply because security would have been outside, and of course the royal chauffeur there too. But here's where it gets really fascinating, because he basically decided at this particular point that the only way to secure Wallis's sort of, well, you know, secrecy, as it were, at one point the idea, of course, was to keep her here in the United Kingdom, because he couldn't get away that easily, and he wanted to see her as and when he could. So the idea really fell down to the fact that he was going to ensconce her inside one of the luxurious hotels of the day. Now, of course, the most obvious one would have been somewhere like the Dorchester, only being opened a few years at that point and a glittering success. But far too many people would have very much picked up on the fact that she would have been spotted. So he cast his eye towards another luxurious hotel, the Savoy. And the reason why he picked the Savoy was quite simply this. They have a secret side entrance just off the side street, which could have dropped her off and gone in the secret lift, and nobody would have even been known that she was actually living there. This was all apparently put into plan and going quite well. Until, of course, Wallis found out this particular big secret. Oh yes. See, the Savoy was also the site of a murder on July the 9th in 1923. Marguerite Famay was a Parisian courtesan, basically a lady of the night. But also she'd been a paramour, lover and letter writer to the king. And this particular story had been washed over, something that apparently Wallis Simpson had no idea about. She had, no idea that he'd had a previous relationship. But what a lot of people don't realise was that Marguerite would also become a resident, all thanks to the king, as part of her deal to carry on seeing him. Now, what happened was, literally, the moment that Wallis Simpson realised that this was something that had been repeated before, there was no way that she was going to be living, of course, inside a hotel that was associated with a former paramour of the king. And according to a very well-placed source at the time, she thought this may be the argument that could end the relationship. Yes, she did want out of it at that point. A lot of placating took place, and that's the reason, in fact, why the whole Savoy deal fell through. But more importantly, he'd already booked it for a year, and this became very difficult then to extract back, because obviously they claimed that they'd lost a lot of money. It's all in the files of the Savoy if you want to take a look. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because as many people may know in the annals of history, Marguerite did try and blackmail the king with these letters if he wasn't going to help her out financially. It all got very murky. The bottom line was, though, that Wallis Simpson could not believe that the king was literally replicating a similar situation. How could he? Did she not mean more to him than a mere sort of streetwalker? And this apparently was the argument of arguments. Sources at the time basically said, though, that Wallis was looking for a way out. Of course, then she thought this could be it. Maybe she could storm off. But he was not having it, and sorted everything out for her to disappear over to Paris, out of the way of the prying lens of the London media. But either way, they never wanted to go back to the Savoy, certainly never stay over, and it took some years for them to even think about going into the cocktail bar. That's how bad that particular argument was. Now, was Wallis really using this as a cop-out finally to rid herself, as some might say, a very difficult and demanding and childish king? Or indeed, was she truly that hurt? Either way, I'd love to know what you think to this particular royal scandal. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.